phosphate, it's not just about fertilizers. We have to recognize that this is a battery material. We don't want to explore. We want to cap this off and we want to move to feasibility study.
Welcome back to Rockstock Channel. It is Tuesday, March 31st, and today we're doing a follow-up interview with John Passalacqua, CEO of First Phosphate, a company we've now covered multiple times, including most recently at PDAC following their $17 million government grant. For those new to the story, First Phosphate is a Quebec-focused critical minerals developer building a vertically integrated phosphate supply chain specifically for lithium iron phosphate, LFP, batteries, which are increasingly dominating energy storage, data centers, and electrification more broadly. And since we last spoke, there's been a continued operational progress, including today's announcement that the company has completed a 40,000-meter infill drill program at Béguin-Lamarche, confirming strong continuity and identifying new mineralized zones to the north and south, with an updated geological model expected shortly. At the same time, the broader market narrative continues to shift toward battery energy storage as the primary demand driver, where LFP chemistry is increasingly the technology of choice. And as John likes to say, don't forget the P in LFP. We'll also touch on a recent short video the company released, which interviewed several Canadian and European officials talking about the importance of this project. First Phosphate trades on the Canadian Stock Exchange, ticker symbol PHOS, at 95 cents, which is 5 cents above its most recent equity raise last December, which brought in $10 million. Current market cap is about 143 million Canadian market value, and as of recent disclosures, the company has over 20 million Canadian in cash. The stock is covered by a number of sell-side analysts, including Dimitri Silverstein of Water Tower Research, who recently initiated coverage. If you'd like access to this research, please reach out to us at rockstockchannel@rkequity.com. And as always, a quick disclaimer that RK is a strategic advisor to and holds equity interests in First Phosphate. But we are not financial advisors. This discussion is for informational purposes only, and nothing you hear should be considered investment advice. Please do your own research and read the disclaimer at the end of this video. We'd also like to thank our two sponsors, USCF Investments and Lithium Royalty Corp. USCF Investments has been making exposure to investments for almost 20 years. Their Battery Metal Strategy Fund, ZSB, is designed to capture investment exposure to metals powering electrification, such as lithium, cobalt, copper, nickel, aluminum, and silver. And Lithium Royalty Corp., who recently got acquired by Altius Minerals. Altius is a 2 billion Canadian diversified royalty company with producing and development stage royalties across copper, potash, iron ore, renewable electricity, and some gold assets as well, and now a very significant lithium portfolio. And with that, John, welcome back. I'm going to hand it over to my partner, Matt Fernley, to take a deep dive.
Hey, John, how's it going? I try and steer away from the thumb screws and everything, so let's get started. So today's news, you've now completed roughly 40,000 meters of drilling, confirming the continuity of the deposit, and actually, interestingly, identifying some new zones to the north and south of the existing resource. How should investors interpret the results that you put out today?
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Thanks, Howard. Great to be on. So, as you know, we had completed already about 30 to 35,000 meters of drilling in our past drilling campaigns, which there were a few of them. And that brought us up to the PEA. PEA was announced, I think, in December of 2024. And that had a really good NPV of 2.1 billion, and it had an IRR of about 37%. So what we've had to do now is we've proceeded with what is the infill drilling. So for that PEA, the property had been drilled at 100-meter centers. Now we drilled at 50-meter centers, like you said, to confirm the continuity and consistency of the resource, which we did. Obviously, we have to wait for the assays to come out, and that will help us to build the geological model. So obviously, when you're doing that, you're moving from inferred and indicated resources up to indicated and measured, which is what is necessary for the next stage of the company, which is to move into a feasibility study. So once we crunch all this data that we've received from this final drill program, another 40,000 meters, we were planning only 30, but like you said, we encountered more mineralization in a couple of zones to the east that we found interesting, and we encountered more mineralization down deep. The deposit is fully open down deep. There's just a lot of it. We had to really pick our spots and decide where to go. But we did an extra 10,000 meters. So we did an extra 10 on 30 equals 40. So in total, there's been about 70 to 75,000 meters of drilling on this property, which is incredible. And the important thing to note is that this last drill program was brought in. Not only did we do an extra 33% of drilling, but we also brought it in 1 month ahead of time, which speaks to the great execution that we have, not only from our geologists, but also really the logistics of the area. Right, we're sitting at 40 kilometers pretty much from major cities in Saguenay, Lac Saint Jean area. So it makes the drilling a lot easier. It's easier to when you find something to do something to go a little bit over and to really define the resource. So the next steps now are really to crunch all that data, build a 3D geological model, present that to our board, and obviously the next step would be for our board to approve a feasibility study. We've been sort of indicating the feasibility study if everything comes in happily and our board is comfortable, and we launch the feasibility study, that should be completed by end of 2026. So that's quite a big step here. This would probably be the last real sort of drilling that we do in terms of defining the resource. Everything else would be extra and exploratory. As you know, these resources go on forever, right? At a certain point, you have to decide when you have enough, and then you start on your feasibility study. Otherwise, you don't get out of exploration.
And just to sort of cut in there, just to confirm that the PEA and the feasibility study that you referred to, that's just on the phosphate resource. That's not on any of the sort of midstream and downstream stuff.
Correct. Yeah, this is just for the mine at Baymarsh. There's also the transformation into boric acid and then the transformation into LFP cathode active materials. Those separate plants, and those will be separate NPVs, etc. Looking at that is blue sky. Right now, we're just talking really the mine.
Okay, and can you confirm the depth of the drill holes that you've used in the mine so far?
Yeah, I think they've gone down. In general, obviously, we have to wait until the assays come out. But if you look at our past drill program, they were going down to about 300, 350 meters. Some holes punch a little bit lower, but that's kind of the general range. And we know it's open beyond there, but we're looking for an open pit mine, and we're looking to be at the broadest economies right now. So for now, that's kind of what we think is the limit of the pit. It will be somewhere between 300 to 400 meters.
Okay, and you discussed these new mineralized intersections, and you mentioned them in the press release as well. Potentially, could those be extensions to the existing resource?
Oh yeah, absolutely. They're on the east side of the resource. We know the resource pretty much to be sort of fully capped at the north, fully capped at the west. The resource does continue to the south. It starts to the grades start to go down. But what we found there at the east, I mean, obviously we have to wait for the assays to come out and all of that. It's quite consistent with the rest of the deposit, and you just don't know how much further that goes on. So we've tested it. I'm sure there's going to be more testing to do, but at some point, we have to shut down the model, move to the feasibility study, and everything else just becomes exploration. So it's good news, right? It means that there's blue sky on the project, right? But again, I just want to really focus in on, we don't want to do what a lot of junior exploration companies do, which is explore. We want to cap this off, and we want to move to feasibility study, and we'd like to, get this into production for 2020.
I mean, I think that's the right thing to do, but it's good news that there's still potential to expand the footprint of the deposit at depth and along strike if you needed to, if you wanted to sort of, ramp up the capacity of the project or go a bit faster in terms of the capacity of the midstream.
Yeah, what this does is it kind of tells our engineers to, on the east side, be careful how you're building the pit, that there might be some expansion there in the future, right? So that's really helpful for us to define kind of what's fuzzy around the deposit, around the main deposit, and that, you don't know what's there.
Okay, cool. So moving on from the drill results, you recently put out a short video explaining the project and the broader LFP supply chain. What are the 2 to 3 key points that you really wanted to communicate to investors within the video that maybe aren't fully appreciated in a traditional investor presentation or whatever?
Well, I think the video that you're referring to is the one where we received the $16.7 million contribution from the government of Canada. I mean, I think what's really important in that video is to see just who was at the table, right? So there was Minister Hodgson and I shaking hands, and it was a really nice time, really nice. Had a couple jokes with him at the table, which was great. And then, but we also had the representatives of Belgium. The ambassador of Belgium was at the table, and the ambassador for critical minerals of Belgium, and linked to the EU, was there too, just to show you how important this resource is to Europe, and the fact that the two governments are working together. I don't think it would have been possible to have attained that grant if it wasn't for the support that we received out of our European partners, because that's something that the Canadian government really looks for. To move into allied supply chains. So there were 30 companies that were given these grants that day. We were one of the few, I would say one of the top 5 or so that was supported by, allies, mostly in Europe. And we were also one of the top 3 contributions to be had. I think we were number 3 on the list in terms of the aggregate amount of the contribution. So very important to see who was at the table and who made that happen. And we're very thankful to, our allied partners in Europe for this.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, and I mean, what do you think it means for, I mean, the industry in general, but First Phosphate in particular, that phosphate's gone on to the Canadian government's A list now?
Yeah, look, I mean, it was really, really important, right? So nickel, manganese, cobalt batteries were seen as, the battery of the future 5, 10 years ago when these lists were started. So you had a list of critical minerals, then you had a list of really strategic A-list minerals, if you will, the super minerals, and you had lithium on there, and you had nickel, cobalt, manganese, everything that went into the NMC battery. But now, for the first time, the Canadian government said, "Hey, look, phosphate. It's not just about fertilizers, but there's high purity igneous phosphate, and we've got companies in Quebec that are looking to exploit this or down the road in building a supply chain such as First Phosphate. We have to recognize that this is a battery material." So they now moved us onto sort of what you will call, the clean tech list, the battery materials list. So now phosphate, igneous phosphate, being recognized as a battery material. As lithium iron phosphate batteries take over 60, 65, 70% of all batteries on planet Earth are now, phosphate based, and the phosphate is 60% of the cathode. So good on the Canadian government to recognize this. The U.S. government also recognized in December phosphate as a critical mineral for both agriculture and battery tech applications. And now we're just waiting for other jurisdictions to do the same. We're already on the European list as critical, waiting to get strategic on there as well.
Excellent. Okay, and obviously we've talked in the past about the government grant, which is $16.7 million, which is a lot of money. So congratulations on that. But beyond the monetary value, what's the significance of the grant? Because I mean, it seems that between the phosphate going onto the A list and the grant, that you're very much on the Canadian government radar now.
Yeah, look, it's important I don't put words into the Canadian government's mouth, but obviously, they do a lot of due diligence. It was, a good year plus of due diligence for us to get that grant. It took partners coming on board. It took a definitive offtake. It took a definitive offtake that had some prepayment made to it as well, if you remember, in January. It took the ambassadors of Belgium, the European Union around the table. So it took a lot to get us to that level. Again, we thank everybody that was involved. You have to remember, right? The governments, they're not looking at it like we look at it sometimes as investors. Hey, we want to make $1 on the stock. They're looking at it in terms of employment. They're looking at it in terms of GDP growth. They're looking in terms of tax base. And if they get involved in a project, it's because they want to see that project to light. And out of 30 projects that were mentioned that day, we were kind of number 3 in terms of the quantum of capital allocated to it. So it means the government wants to see this move forward. So we've got a partner in the project, if I can say that loosely, is the Canadian government. And as long as First Phosphate does the right job, as long as we don't screw anything up in terms of how we approach the project, and we continue along the great lines that we've been on, all of the other Canadian government programs are open to us. There's major infrastructure monies out there. If you saw even Nouveau Monde Graphite just recently, I think they got a really big Canadian infrastructure fund loan. I mean, that's all great capital that helps you to build a cap stack when you go to build these things. So great to have the Canadian government at the table. We have the Quebec government that's already expressed interest. We have local Indigenous groups that have expressed interest, European groups. And the fact that this grant contribution from the Canadian government was together with Belgium and the European Union, has also opened the valves for that financing over there in Europe. So, we can say comfortably that, the world, or Canada and our allies, are at the table to make this project happen, and that's really important. It's a really important signal to everybody, internally, to our staff, outside, to markets, and also to the whole world, that Canada's here, is open for business, and wants to get the Beijing-La-Marche igneous phosphate project and the whole LFP battery supply chain going in North America. And First Phosphate is one of the companies that will help them to do that.
Excellent. Okay. Now, I mean, also since we last spoke, you've announced an ADR program for First Phosphate. What's the symbol of the share, and what do you think that means for the stock going forward as well?
Yeah, so the American Depository Receipt just allows institutions in the U.S. to start to get familiar with the stock. The symbol is PHOY, Peter, Harry, Oscar, Yellow. It trades on the OTCQX. It's just another means for shareholders to be able to get involved in the story. Obviously, eventually, it can be a symbol to uplist onto one of the major exchanges at some point. But in the meantime, it sort of opens up our capital structure, and it's exploratory, and it's just another means to improve the cap structure and access to the shares.
Okay, great. So, I mean, we've mentioned quite a lot. You've done quite a lot in a pretty short space of time here. You've got the government grant, the offtake progress, the ADR, the drilling update. What's the single biggest shift in how investors should view First Phosphate today versus 3 months ago?
Yeah, look, massive de-risking, right? We've always been out there. We've always been a team that executes. I think we're recognized in the market for that. So, just the execution continuing to come together, and also the de-risking, thanks to the Canadian government, the Belgian government, the European Union. But, even this drill program brought in a month ahead of time, 33% more drilling, no problems. It just speaks to the logistics in the area and how quickly we can get things done, because we're in a major population basin there. In Quebec, we're not sitting, thousands of kilometers in the north. We can move, we can shift, we can alter, we can make decisions on the fly, which is great. So just proof of the pudding, right? The logistics are there, the infrastructure is there, the team is here to make it happen. The governments are at the table to make it happen. So just massive de-risking, and the world finally understanding that it is about LFP batteries, right? Lithium iron phosphate batteries, the batteries I'm showing right here on the screen. These batteries that we created, right? These batteries were created from the phosphate that comes from the Beijing-La-Marche site. So we've been able to get from dirt in the ground all the way to battery.
And do you feel sort of increasingly, as you're marketing, that there begins to be a better understanding of, the gap in the LFP industry in Europe, North America, that, that there is, a lack of the P, if we're going to call it that, in the LFP supply chain?
Yeah, look, I do. LFP batteries, all of the big heavyweights have switched, even in the West, from NMC to LFP in the last 6 to 12 months. And now they're focusing on, supplying. Where are we going to supply this from? And, the phosphate still predominantly is coming from overseas, coming from Asia, coming mostly from China. And so there's going to be a need for this in the Western world. And, First Phosphate was quietly building when nobody knew, nobody cared, nobody thought it could happen. And it just puts us in this really good position here, this position of strength where, we're the furthest along, right at the right place at the right time. But it took all that hard work in the beginning. And so, yes, I mean, look, just the fact that the Canadian government put phosphate on its A list, that goes to show you they're recognizing, lithium iron phosphate batteries are now the majority of batteries out there, and it continues to grow. So yes, it's like the moment for graphite. It's like the moment for lithium. It's like the moment for nickel, copper, all of these elements. I think it's the moment for phosphate now, and the awareness is certainly improving every day.
And John, I have to ask you this, just based on current sort of market fundamentals, but obviously in the production of phosphoric acid, particularly high purity phosphoric acid, using sulfuric acid to get there. Where would you be sourcing your sulfur from? Would you be sourcing it probably from Canada, from Western Canada, or are you looking at other sulfur sources?
Yeah, look, I mean, Canada's very blessed. North America is very blessed with sulfur. So our plans for the moment would be to build our own sulfuric acid burner, a smaller one. And so that would require elemental sulfur. There's lots in the Canadian West. There's lots out of Vancouver that's stockpiled. And, there's still a lot that comes from the southeastern United States in terms of the actual sulfuric acid, and out of the Gulf region, which we know is now troubled for the sulfuric acid and sulfur. But yeah, we're quite independent here in North America, in Canada for sulfur and sulfuric acid. Quite lucky that way.
Excellent. Okay, that's all from me.
Thanks for that, Matt, and thanks, John, for that great quick update. You've had, some good news flow. We caught up briefly at PDAC, but wanted to, give a more in-depth view here. That video is great. The support you're getting from the Canadian as well as European governments is very reflective of the importance of this project. So, Matt, thanks for diving deep, and John for all the color. So we like this story. There's not that many ways to play phosphate, and as everything from Iola Hughes in our recent interview and other data points, we're about to interview Fast Markets. John, actually, for any of our viewers here, John will be at the Fast Markets conference. I think you're a premium sponsor, and we'd strongly encourage any and all of our listeners to register for that Fast Markets event, where both battery energy storage and the importance of the P will be in focus. Matt and I will be there. Matt, I think, moderating a panel, which includes the commentary on this important ingredient to the battery supply chain. So thanks again, John, and look forward to catching up as further milestones are hit.
Yeah, great to be here, guys, and thank you for the good work you're doing for the industry in terms of lithium and understanding and really deep diving into battery chemistry is really important.
Okay, until next time.